I refer not to danger inherent in the jungle or to the inevitable hardships attendant upon travel in remote areas, but rather and obviously to the psychological stress inherent in confronting the phenomenon, strangely so much a part of oneself and yet vast and other, away from the mitigating world of friends and a world that is unaware or skeptical concerning our encounter with the phenomenon and the subsequent understanding which we derived from it. My first consideration in this area is to do all in my ability to eliminate the unexpected. My brother's crypto-schizophrenic reversal is ever in my mind in this regard. I believe we are dealing with something to which no vagueness or uncertainty of inner dynamics adheres. Careful thought and study can eliminate the possibility of the contact phenomena suddenly turning on us or otherwise behaving unexpectedly. The right approach to these things remains elusive. Again and again, the inner voice of the phenomenon has insisted that, since my brother's opus of hypercarbylation, nothing at all remains to be done, and that if something is required in the way of activity, then by virtue of the very nature of the contact, that something will be exactly what we are doing. Ev and I lived quietly at La Chorrera from August until November of 1971. And during that time I was able to completely indulge my submersion in the interior processes that I was experiencing. During this second residency at La Chorrera, the theme of ukuhe recurred. We had made the acquaintance of several of the Witoto people who regularly walk the path near our own hut, a few hundred yards down the same path from where the original experiment took place. Among those Witoto who stopped to exchange a word or watch me collecting insects was a sturdy older man named Demetrius. In my excited state of mind, the letters D, M, and T seemed to stand out in his name like a beacon. As soon as I could get him alone, I haltingly put the question to him. Ukuhe? Ukuhe? He was barely able to believe his ears. That this strange, weak creature, like something from another world, should directly inquire after a secret tradition of his people was incredible. I have no idea how many cultural conventions were overlooked, but after a bit more conversation, or what passes for conversation between people who share no common language, I was sure that he would try to help me. Days later, on my 24th birthday, I was brought a tarry goo wrapped in a little leaf packet. I was never able personally to obtain a hallucinogenic experience from this material, but later analysis by the chemists of the Karolinska Institute confirmed the presence of dimethyltryptamine. Demetrius had been as good as his word. By the time that life at La Chorrera had actually carried us through November 16th, 1971, the date that the chart and the accumulation of coincidences had generated seemed to indicate as the critical date, I had begun to realize that the chart had too many variables to ever function as a predictive map of the future. It would be necessary, I realized then, to somehow quantify the various parameters of the wave so that judgments concerning it could be less subject to personal bias. The last piece of writing that I did at La Chorrera was done on the morning of the 16th. It was a kind of fable. Two old friends, Arabian somehow, yet more ancient, sit in a palace far older than themselves, set on a mountainside surrounded by vineyards, date palms, and citrus orchards. Insomniac and affable, they pass the long starry hours preceding dawn in the smoking of hashish and the propounding of riddles. "Share my pleasure at this puzzle and its resolution," said the darker to the older, and he passed his hand across his companion's eyes. The older man then stood in the dream and watched the puzzle, a world of form and law, interlocking wheels and passion and intellect unfold. He passed into its species and empires, dynastic families and individual persons of genius, philosophers and catastrophes. He felt the texture and tone of all the being in the world his friend had created. He sought the secret pattern his friend, he knew, had surely hidden in his creation, for this was a game that they often played. Finally, in a great despotism, in an age of brash science and bright decadence, he saw himself divided into the persons of two brothers. Through time, through their wanderings and lifetimes which passed before him in a moment, he perceived the intricate and pleasing nature of the riddle. Understanding, he dissolved the mists and wheels of the dream fable with a laugh they shared, and then once more they passed their pipe before strolling into the azure garden where dawn would find them among the peacocks beneath the pomegranates and bending acacias. The important thing about the second trip to La Chorrera was that the teaching was more or less continuous, and what it taught after months and months was an idea about time. It is an idea which is very concrete. It has mathematical rigor. The teacher showed me how to do something with the I Ching that perhaps no one had ever before known how to do. Perhaps the Chinese knew how to do it once and lost it thousands of years ago. It taught me a hypertemporal way of seeing. The invisible landscape explained all this. It is not something that can be corralled within the confines of a conversation. It enables one to have as much of a certain kind of knowledge of the future as it is possible to know. The future is not absolutely determined. There is not, in other words, a future to see in which every event is determined. That isn't how the universe is put together. The future does not have that nature of already completedness, but it is conditioned. What had originally gotten me looking at the I Ching was the odd way in which my early simplistic notion of 64-day cycles of some kind of set of influences worked very well in my own life surrounding the time of the experiment. My mother's death was the first of these points in time that I isolated. Then I noted that my chance-formed relationship with Eve had begun 64 days after that, and the culmination of the experiment at La Chorrera had occurred another 64 days later. The notion of the hexagram year grew out of the idea of 6 cycles of 64 days each, a year of 6 parts, just as a hexagram has 6 lines. The personal worth of the idea was confirmed for me when I noticed that such a year of 384 days, if begun at the time of my mother's death, would end on my own 24th birthday on the 16th of November, 1971. I saw then that there were cycles and cycles of cycles. I imagined a 384-day lunar year, and then the thing of which it was only a part, a cycle of 64 times 384 days, and so on. The maps that I constructed and the eventual quantification of them that I achieved is told of in the invisible landscape, but what was not told there was the way in which these coincidences and my unconscious mind, or something in my mind, would guide me to discover the properties of the I Ching. what to make of the ocean of resonances that the time charts seem to show, connecting every moment of time to every other through a scheme of connection that knew nothing of randomness or causality, and what to make of the way that the chart